Hello students, welcome to week 10. We're going to be focusing on chapter 10 in our textbook. This is the final chapter that we're going to be focusing on for exam 2, and so you have exam 2 this week. So the topic is problem assessment, planning, and brokering. Some questions to consider as we're going through this chapter. Why is it important to make an accurate assessment of a client's presenting problem? What general principles govern the assessment and planning process? What types of assessment data should be gathered from clients? And what is linking brokering of services? So we start off with a little, very short case study. The human services deals with a wide variety of problems, of people problems, and no single treatment technique or problem can meet the issues of all people. So the human service worker must sort of sort out and identify the specific problems that an individual might be dealing with and accurately assess what it is to be able to identify what can be helpful and what they should do with the individual. And so it goes on to talk about typical problems seen by human service workers, and it has a little case for each of them, which is really awesome. So problems of personal dissatisfaction, problems of isolation, problems of poverty, problems of addiction, problems of crisis, problems of severely disruptive behavior. And so obviously each of these is going to be treated in a very different way. And so you have to identify which one of these it is. But what complicates things is it's very rarely one of these, it's often multiple, at least two. And so we have to sort of assess that out and figure out what the best method for addressing the client's needs might be. And so we need to tailor services to the problems that the client is experiencing. And problem identification is a process to be used to expedite linkages. And so if we can assess what the problem is in an effective manner, then we can get the client connected to the services that they might need. And so this can start off with a triage, which is a process of helping to identify what the difficulties are. And so some of the important things that are principles essentially of the triage are not all people are alike. Different problems demand different solutions. The more specific to the problem the solution is, the more effective and efficient it will be. So identifying that problem helps in those ways as well. And the less intrusive the solution, the better. Solutions are more effective if applied soon after the development of the problem. So the sooner we can get to this, the better. Problem must be identified or assessed accurately if appropriate solutions and resources are to be linked to the client. And solutions should include client input. We shouldn't be making these decisions without them. We should be engaging in discussion with them as we're going through this process. And so there's a number of issues that can happen with assessment. We want to make sure that we ask the client, ask someone who knows the person, observe the client in the natural setting if possible. Use your sisters. And observe the person in certain standardized testing situations as well. Most often we use the interview, and in some cases we can only interview the client, no one else, and so it limits us sometimes. And so in the triage process, the goals are ordinarily to identify their problem, determine the factors that led to the development of the problem, and determine the severity of the problem, which is very important. And so the interview can help with some of that. It includes learning the client's problem, collecting data, and organizing and interpreting the data, and then taking some action on it. And so there may be other forms of assessment that might be needed. We want to begin developing a trustful relationship with the client. We talked about that as being very important in helping the client make changes. And this can be really difficult when we may have a different cultural or identities that are different from our clients. And so hopefully this is discussed in future courses in further detail, but how can we connect with people who may be seemingly very different from us? We must also be sensitive to the behaviors that might be typical of their cultural identities and maybe not of ours, and not expect them to fit some specific mold. Assessment can also be biased based on language and emotional expression, which may be very different in different people and different identities, and then the human service worker must be aware of various forms of etiquette that could be important to different cultures, not to offend someone or expect certain things of a person. And so the initial assessment interview is obtaining information that they may need during the triage process, helping to kind of connect someone with the services they need. And so it has a nice little outline of some things that might be very important for you to include in that initial interview. The next phase is planning. And so now that we know this information, what can we do? How do we develop a service plan along with the client that can address some of these different areas of need? And it's possible and even likely that the client receives the initially identified services that they may recognize other needs, and that's okay, but this is just kind of getting a good start. Next is brokering, which is linking the client to different services. And so it may be through the work that we do in our profession as a human service worker, or it might be connecting them with other individuals in other areas of need. And so we're problem identifiers, and then we connect them to other things, which is a really important thing as human service workers to know about what resources are available to our clients, what's near us, what's online, what do they have access to and ability to connect with. Sometimes there are issues getting people connected or follow through. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to that. And if clients have significant issues, sometimes they're not able to follow through with things. And so how do we give them the support that specifically they need as a person to make those connections, maintain those connections, and get some use out of those connections that we're making for them. So some follow-up. And level of support. It may be, kind of sitting down with the client, making those phone calls or making those connections rather than just kind of handing them a paper, do this, do this, do this. So it varies greatly. And so the chapter again ends with a summary, recommended readings, internet sites to check out, and then some connecting with my help lab to dig into the materials a little bit deeper. And so pretty straightforward chapter. Again, the biggest takeaway I think is reading those specific, really short cases about the different types of issues that might be presenting themselves in our offices or in our work locations, and how can we also imagine multiple ones of those areas being in play with one individual, and how we might address that. And so take some time to go over those and consider what your work would be like with those individuals. But look for, another video again next week as we go into chapter 11 and our final kind of section of the semester. The last 5 chapters will be all involved in our exam 3, but best wishes this week as you complete exam 2, and let me know if you have any questions about the material as we move forward. So thank you. Bye.